I still remember the silence of that Tuesday morning. I was standing by the office coffee machine, adding a splash of milk to my cup when Brandon Fletcher walked in. He was the newly appointed chief executive officer and the son of our founder. Brandon did not smile or greet me. He simply stared at me as if I were a piece of old office furniture that had overstayed its usefulness. He adjusted his tie and spoke in a cold tone. "Gerald, I need you in my office now. It was not a request. I had been with Fletcher Supply Group for 14 years. In that time, I had built the international logistics division from the ground up, negotiating over 100 major agreements and training almost every person currently sitting outside his door. None of that seemed to matter to Brandon. His father, Donald Fletcher, had built this firm with grit and unwavering loyalty to his staff. Brandon, however, had inherited his title alongside a business school degree, and he apparently believed those credentials gave him the right to act like a god. I followed him into his office, taking a slow breath to calm the sudden tightness in my chest. He did not even bother to sit down behind his massive desk. "You are dismissed," he said, his voice flat and completely devoid of emotion. "We do not need slow, lazy people like you dragging our operations down anymore." I blinked, momentarily convinced this was some kind of poorly timed joke. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You heard me," he replied, casually flipping through a stack of folders on his desk as if he were deciding on a lunch menu. "You can pack up your personal belongings and leave the premises. Your termination is effective immediately." I stood there, stunned, my pulse drumming in my ears. A younger version of me would have shouted, demanded an explanation, or pointed out the absurdity of his decision. But after decades in this industry, I had learned the power of silence. Instead of reacting, I let a calm, polite, and very deliberate smile spread across my face. "Understood," I replied. "I hope you have a pleasant afternoon, Brandon." I turned and walked out of his office with my chin held high, even though my hands were trembling slightly with adrenaline. My team members looked up as I passed their desks, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. A couple of junior coordinators started to stand up, but I gave them a subtle shake of the head. There was no need to make a scene or make this transition any harder. I packed the contents of my desk into a single cardboard box in absolute silence. As I drove away from the building that had been my second home for over a decade, a wave of memories washed over me. 14 years. I had given this firm more hours than I had spent with my own family. I had worked through holidays, managed late-night supply chain crises, and taken urgent international calls while dealing with the painful aftermath of my divorce. I had poured my life into this place, and now I was being discarded like an empty paper cup. Yet, as the initial shock faded, I did not feel angry. I felt a deep, cold curiosity. One question kept repeating in my mind all evening as I sat in my quiet living room. Why did Brandon do it now? The timing was incredibly strange. We were only 3 days away from finalizing our largest contract of the decade, a massive multi-million-dollar distribution deal with Gulf Horizon Group. I had spent 6 months preparing for this negotiation. I knew the client, their shipping pain points, and their leadership team inside and out. I had even scheduled the final review meeting for this coming Friday. Now I was gone. Had Brandon even looked at the contract details? Did he have any understanding of the legal frameworks governing international logistics? I sat in the dark watching the city lights flicker outside my window. Brandon was arrogant, but surely he was not that foolish. Or perhaps he was. The next morning, shortly after 9, my phone began to vibrate on the kitchen counter. I did not recognize the number, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. I was not sure I had the energy to speak to anyone from the office, but curiosity won. "Gerald, it is Donald Fletcher." The voice of our retired founder sent a jolt of energy straight down my spine. This was the man who had hired me 14 years ago after a single firm handshake. "I just walked into the headquarters," Donald said, and I could hear a sharp strain in his voice. "Why on earth did you pack up your office and leave? What happened?" I paused for a second, then spoke clearly. "Your son dismissed me yesterday afternoon." There was a long silence on the line, followed by a sharp, ragged breath. "He did what?" Donald demanded. "Brandon told me I was lazy and that my services were no longer required," I explained calmly. Another heavy silence stretched between us. When Donald spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. "Gerald, Did my son read your employment agreement before he did this? I frowned. What do you mean? Donald sighed. He is supposed to finalize the partnership with Gulf Horizon Group at 11 this morning, is he not? Yes, I replied. We were scheduled to meet their executives. Good heavens, Donald muttered. I heard the sound of papers rustling furiously, followed by a loud thud as if he had slammed his fist onto his desk. Gerald, your contract has a specific key person clause. The one we drafted after the last merger. You are the only legally authorized negotiator for the Gulf Horizon deal. The entire agreement is void without your signature. I froze on the other end of the line, a sudden wave of understanding washing over me. The key person clause. It was Section 12B of my employment agreement, a safeguard we had put in place 3 years ago during our expansion. It stated explicitly that due to my specialized knowledge of Middle Eastern logist regulations and my personal relationship with the client's board, I was the sole representative authorized to negotiate and finalize the Gulf Horizon contract. If I were terminated or removed from the account, the negotiation process was legally suspended, and any agreement signed by another representative would be void from the beginning. This clause was not a standard template. We had custom drafted it after a previous acquisition debacle where a rival firm attempted to poach our regional clients during a leadership transition. Donald had insisted on this provision to guarantee client trust. The Gulf Horizon Group's board had made it clear that their partnership was built on my personal oversight. Without my direct involvement, the entire multi-million-dollar logistics network would be thrown into legal limbo, exposing both companies to massive operational risks. Brandon had no idea. In his haste to assert authority and clean house, he had pulled the trigger without reviewing my personnel file or the legal structure of the deal. He had pointed the gun directly at his own feet. Donald Fletcher hung up the phone without another word. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. I sat in my quiet apartment, looking down at my cooling cup of coffee, and let out a soft, dry laugh. For 14 years, I had worked myself to the bone, wondering if my efforts were truly valued or if I was just another line item on a spreadsheet. Now the answer was clear. Brandon wanted to play the role of the modern, ruthless executive, but he had ignored the actual machinery that kept the company alive. I did not have to wait long for the storm to break. At exactly 13 minutes past 10 in the morning, my phone lit up. It was Brandon. I watched it ring, feeling a calm sense of detachment, and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a call came from the main reception desk, then from the corporate legal department, then from accounting. My phone was buzzing continuously on the table, lighting up like a Christmas tree. I did not answer a single call. I was in no rush. I finally opened the voicemail from Brandon. His voice was strained, the usual arrogant tone replaced by a thin veneer of forced politeness. I could hear the background noise of the busy office, the distant ring of phones, and the sharp voice of Brandon's secretary. Brandon himself sounded like he was trying to keep his composure but failing miserably. The arrogance that had defined him yesterday was gone, replaced by a desperate, cracking tone. Gerald, hello. It is Brandon. Listen, there was a minor misunderstanding yesterday afternoon. I believe I may have acted a bit too hastily. We have some urgent matters regarding the Gulf Horizon signing today, and we need you to come back to the office immediately. Please call me back as soon as you get this. Urgent. The word hung in the air. He did not say he was sorry. He did not apologize for calling me lazy or throwing my 14 years of service in the trash. It was just a panicked command disguised as a professional request. I took another sip of my coffee, remaining still. Shortly after, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Clara, a senior marketing manager who had worked alongside me for nearly a decade, I answered. Gerald, you will not believe the absolute chaos happening in the executive wing right now, Clara whispered, her voice bubbling with excitement. Tell me, I replied. Brandon just got completely shredded by his father in front of the entire management team, she said. Donald walked into the boardroom, threw the Gulf Horizon contract onto the table, and asked Brandon if he had bothered to read Section 12B before firing you. Brandon tried to bluff his way out of it, saying something about restructuring and bringing in fresh blood. But Donald was not having it. He pointed at the clause and told Brandon that if the Gulf Horizon partnership falls through because of his arrogance, Brandon's position as chief executive officer will be open for discussion. Clara paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Gerald, he looked absolutely ghost pale. He realized he is the sole reason the biggest deal in company history is about to walk out the door. You hold all the cards now. I thanked Clara and hung up, looking out the window at the quiet city skyline. I felt no joy in Donald's anger, but I felt a profound sense of relief. At 15 minutes past 11, a text message arrived from Donald himself. Gerald, I am sincerely sorry for the disrespectful treatment you experienced. I misjudged the transition of power. Please come back to the office, not just to save the deal, but so we can discuss your future under much better terms. I was tempted to reply immediately, but I knew I had to establish firm boundaries. I was not going to walk back in like a scolded dog. I waited 5 minutes before typing my response. I will return to negotiate the Gulf Horizon Agreement, but only under the condition that I speak with you privately first, and that Brandon has no involvement in my department moving forward. I hit send, stood up, and went to get dressed in my best charcoal suit. It was time to return. When I arrived at the headquarters, shortly after noon, I did not use the employee side entrance, as I had done for 14 years. I walked straight through the double-glass doors of the main visitor lobby, checking in with reception as a guest. It was a conscious choice. I wanted to signal that my return was not a meek retreat, but a deliberate business decision. I glanced at the company logo mounted on the granite wall, reflecting on the long journey that had brought me to this pivotal moment. The receptionist looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mr. Vance," she stammered, standing up quickly. "Welcome back. Mr. Donald Fletcher is expecting you in his private office. Right this way, please." As I walked down the carpeted corridor, I could feel the eyes of my former colleagues tracking my progress. The hum of office chatter dropped off, replaced by a sudden heavy silence. People leaned out of their cubicles, murmuring to one another. Word of my firing and the subsequent panic had clearly spread. I kept my expression neutral, my posture straight, as I was led to the founder's corner office. Donald was standing near the large window when I entered. He looked older than he had when he retired, his shoulders slightly stooped under the weight of the family drama. He turned, offering a tired but sincere nod. "Gerald, thank you for coming," he said, stepping forward. I did not offer my hand, choosing instead to take a seat opposite his mahogany desk. Donald closed the door, walked over, and sat down. "I made a massive error in judgment," Donald admitted, rubbing his temples. "I handed my son too much control too quickly. I wanted Brandon to find his footing, but I never expected him to burn down the bridges we built over decades." I remained silent, letting him sit with the discomfort. He leaned forward. "Brandon's behavior was completely unprofessional and insulting. More than that, he nearly destroyed the hardest deal we have ever pursued. I want you to return, Gerald. I want you to run the entire division, and I am prepared to offer you the title of Director of Client Logistics. Name your conditions, and I will sign them." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I had drafted the terms on my laptop before leaving my apartment. "I need a revised employment agreement with absolute autonomy over the Gulf Horizon account, a 20% increase in base salary, and a clear clause stating that Brandon is legally barred from interfering with my department or my staff." Donald scanned the paper, his expression grave. He did not hesitate. He pulled a pen from his desk drawer and signed his name at the bottom. "Done," he said, sliding it back. "The contract is legally binding. Thank you, Gerald." By 1:30, the boardroom was prepared. The executives from Gulf Horizon Group had just arrived, accompanied by their senior legal counsel. I spent 15 minutes reviewing the logistics schedules one last time to ensure every detail was aligned. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see Brandon pacing back and forth in the corridor, looking like a cornered animal. When he tried to approach the boardroom doors, Donald stepped out and intercepted him. Their voices were muffled but intense, ending abruptly when Donald raised a single hand to silence his son. Brandon's face flushed a deep crimson as he walked away, completely humiliated. At exactly 2 o'clock, the meeting began. The chief executive of Gulf Horizon Group, a seasoned executive named Mr. Al Hapsey, took his seat. I welcomed him and his team in their native Arabic, offering a traditional greeting of respect. Mr. Al-Habsi smiled warmly, his tense posture relaxing immediately. "You remembered our customs," he said in English. "Respect is the foundation of any long-term partnership." Mr. Al-Habsi's legal advisor, a sharp woman from London, nodded in agreement. She remarked that our willingness to accommodate their specific maritime routing requirements was a major factor in their decision to proceed. I assured them that under my supervision, their regional shipping lines would receive top priority. The negotiations proceeded flawlessly. I presented the customized logistics schedules and port clearance protocols. We spent considerable time discussing the force majeure exemptions and the maritime insurance structures. My familiarity with Middle Eastern maritime regulations allowed us to resolve two complex transit points in under 20 minutes, a process that would have taken an inexperienced negotiator weeks to untangle. By 4 in the afternoon, the contracts were signed and witnessed. As the client group left, Donald approached me, a look of profound relief on his face. "You saved the company, Gerald," he said quietly. "I owe you a massive apology." "You do not owe me an apology, Donald," I replied, packing my documents. "You owe this company a leader who understands that power is not a weapon and responsibility is not a game." He did not disagree. As I walked out to the parking lot, I felt the heavy burden of the last 2 days lift from my shoulders. But I knew this was not the end. Men like Brandon do not accept defeat easily. They retreat, gather their strength, and strike back from the shadows. By the following week, the signing of the Gulf Horizon contract had made major waves in the regional trade publication, highlighting our tailored maritime strategy and international supply chain leadership. Although the article did not mention me by name, everyone within the headquarters knew exactly who had salvaged the deal. My inbox was flooded with congratulatory notes from colleagues who had remained silent during my brief termination. I appreciated their support, but I was not naive. I knew how quickly the winds could change in corporate corridors. The atmosphere around the office had cleared significantly, yet I could not shake the feeling that a storm was brewing. Brandon had been stripped of direct control over high-level accounts, but he was still the chief executive officer in name. Soon, small, irritating discrepancies began to surface in my department. First, my travel expense reimbursement request for the Gulf Horizon meeting was delayed in accounting, flagged for unnecessary audits. The accounting manager, who had always approved my travel expenses within 48 hours, suddenly claimed she needed additional documentation for a simple business dinner. Next, 2 routine international shipping permits I had submitted for executive sign-off were returned unsigned with no written explanation, forcing our logistics team to scramble and reschedule shipping windows. It was a clear attempt to disrupt my department's flow. Then came the major blow. I was called into the office of our Information Technology Compliance Officer, Keith Miller. Keith was a seasoned professional who had been with the company for 8 years, and we had always maintained a mutual respect. "Gerald, we have a serious issue," Keith said, closing his door and checking the hallway before sitting down. "An email was sent from your corporate account yesterday afternoon to one of our primary maritime partners in Dubai. It contained completely falsified shipping manifests and customs declarations." I stared at him in disbelief. "I did not send any emails yesterday afternoon," I replied. "I was in a face-to-face workshop with our logistics coordinators all day." Keith nodded slowly. "I checked the log, and the timestamp matches your workshop. Furthermore, the partner in Dubai was confused by the errors and reached out directly to check with me. Luckily, they did not execute the shipping orders, but the misinformation could have cost us thousands of dollars in port penalties and severely damaged our credibility." The falsified manifest had listed restricted items, which would have triggered a mandatory inspection, holding our containers at the port for up to 3 weeks. I asked Keith to conduct an immediate digital audit. "There has to be a trace," I said. Keith opened a console window on his screen, revealing lines of network code, internet protocol addresses, and system login logs. The fake email, which had bypassed our standard outgoing security filters, originated from an internal network terminal. It was a shared workstation located just down the hall from the break room, a spot where security cameras were partially blocked by a large potted plant. However, it did not use standard brute force access. The sender entered your exact username and password credentials. I folded my arms, my jaw tightening as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Someone cloned my login credentials or accessed my terminal, I murmured. Keith leaned back, looking uncomfortable. We ran physical security logs for that hallway, Gerald. The only person near that workstation at the exact time of transmission was Spencer Dunn, Brandon's personal executive assistant. I sat in silence for a moment, letting the realization wash over me. It was corporate sabotage. Brandon had realized he could not dismiss me directly because of the key person clause and Donald's intervention. Now he was trying to paint me as incompetent, erratic, or careless. He wanted to build a paper trail of critical operational mistakes, hoping the board would eventually view me as a liability and support my removal. I remembered a similar situation during my early days in this industry 40 years ago. A senior director had played the exact same passive-aggressive games, cutting off resources and whispering doubts behind closed doors. But I was 54 now, not a naive junior coordinator, and I knew how to defend myself. I began to document everything. Every delayed report, every unsigned form, and every digital irregularity was noted in a private leather-bound notebook. I saved screenshots of terminal access logs, compiled network timestamps, and asked Keith to preserve the server backups of the falsified email. I kept my head down, maintained a professional demeanor in meetings, and waited. 2 days later, my suspicions were confirmed when I passed by the small conference room near the executive suites. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard Brandon's voice carrying clearly into the hallway. "He is unstable," Brandon was saying to another manager, his voice filled with theatrical concern. "Ever since Gerald returned, his department has been making constant errors. Falsified shipping manifests sent to international clients, delayed permits, and terrible communication. I am seriously concerned he is not fit to manage our global logistics operations under pressure. We need to start planning a transition." I did not interrupt him. I simply pulled out my phone, recorded a brief voice memo of his statements through the cracked door, and walked away. The trap was set, and Brandon was walking directly into it. On Friday morning, the final showdown occurred in the executive boardroom. I had requested an urgent meeting with Donald, Brandon, and Keith Miller, citing critical compliance issues that threatened our maritime operations. Brandon walked in 10 minutes late, looking completely unbothered, while Donald sat at the head of the table with an exhausted expression. Keith stood near the projector screen, his face grave. Brandon adjusted his jacket and sneered at me. "I hope this meeting is quick, Gerald. We have actual business to run, and I do not have time for minor logistics complaints." I did not respond. I nodded to Keith, who clicked his remote to display the audit findings on the screen. The projection showed a clear timeline of security logs, network internet addresses, and physical security card swipes. Keith pointed to the screen. "Over the past 10 days, several administrative errors and unauthorized emails were sent under Gerald's login credentials. All of these transmissions were traced to a workstation near the break room. However, the physical security logs show that Spencer Dunn, the assistant to the chief executive officer, swiped into that corridor minutes before each email was sent. Furthermore, our server backup records indicate that the system credentials were cloned from a template terminal located in Brandon's suite." Brandon's expression hardened, his smug demeanor cracking into a look of sheer panic. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, his voice rising an octave. "You are accusing my personal staff based on circumstantial evidence. Keith has always been friendly with Gerald, and I suspect this is a coordinated attempt to discredit my leadership. Gerald is just trying to deflect blame for his department's declining performance and cover up his own technical incompetence." It was my turn to speak. I stood up and placed my leather-bound notebook on the table, alongside a printed report. "We have more than circumstances, Brandon," I said. "We have physical proof. Keith has preserved the server records, showing that you personally authorized the creation of the cloned credential template. Furthermore, I have security footage showing Spencer Dunn at the workstation, and I have a voice recording of you discussing a pre-planned transition based on these exact fabricated errors." Brandon opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at his father, but Donald refused to look back at him. I turned to Donald, keeping my voice calm and professional. Under the State Penal Code Section 470, forging a digital signature or fabricating documents to alter corporate contracts constitutes criminal forgery. Moreover, by actively sabotaging our logistics network and risking the Gulf Horizon contract for personal retaliation, Brandon has committed a clear breach of fiduciary duty under corporate law. This exposes the company to massive legal liability. If the board does not act immediately, our maritime partners and the regulatory authorities will be notified. This is a clear violation of Delaware General Corporation law regarding the duty of loyalty and care. Brandon stood up, his face pale with rage. "You cannot threaten me. I am the chief executive officer of this company." "Sit down, Brandon," Donald said, his voice quiet but commanding. It was the same voice he used when resolving board disputes decades ago. Brandon froze, his face twitching with suppressed rage, then slowly sank back into his chair. He looked like a child who had finally been caught in a lie. "I spent 14 years building this firm," Donald continued, looking at his son. "I tolerated your arrogance because I hoped you would learn, but you chose to commit forgery and sabotage the very foundation of this company to satisfy your pride. You have left me no choice." Donald turned to Keith and the legal counsel standing by the door. "Brandon Fletcher is suspended from all executive duties, effective immediately. The board will convene this afternoon to finalize his termination. Spencer Dunn will be dismissed as well, unless he cooperates fully with the legal investigation." Brandon stared at his father in absolute disbelief, realizing that his family ties could not protect him from the consequences of his actions. He stood up silently and walked out of the room, his head bowed. Donald leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. "I am sorry, Gerald," he whispered. "I failed as a father." "You did what was necessary to protect the company and the people who keep it running," I replied gently. 2 weeks later, the board officially announced Brandon's termination and my promotion to Senior Vice President of Global Operations. As I sat in my new office, looking out at the shipping containers moving in the harbor, I felt a deep sense of peace. The nameplate on my door was being replaced, but that did not matter as much as the respect I had earned. I realized that my victory was not about getting revenge or watching Brandon fall. It was about standing up for my own dignity and establishing that competence, experience, and integrity will always triumph over corporate nepotism. I had weathered the storm, and for the first time in 14 years, I knew my value was fully recognized by the company, and more importantly, by myself.